Hello, I'm Tony Taylor, and I'd like to thank you for joining me here at the Exchange Life broadcast. I'm so glad you joined me. Listen, get on the telephone, call someone, and tell them that the Exchange Life broadcast is on, and for them to tune into it. I believe you're going to be blessed today. I tell you today, I've got a dear friend of mine. I've been knowing him for quite some time, for some years now, well over 10 years, probably about 15 years. Brother Larry Anderson, Elder Larry Anderson. And we're going to be talking about today, I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. Now what? What do I do when I'm overwhelmed? So we're going to be talking about that. But Larry, before we get started on that, just tell us a little bit about who you are and what God is calling you to do in your life.
All right, I am an elder at Antioch New Life Christian Center in Simpsonville under Dr. Byron Corbett. God primarily called me to be a teacher in the kingdom, teacher in the body. And I have to give him all the credit. I've authored a couple books and still working on some material, but I have to give God all the credit because without him, I can do nothing. So he enabled me to do what I'm doing.
Good. And so we were talking on the phone. I said, man, come on over here and shoot a show with me. We're going to talk about I'm overwhelmed. And so I know this is going to speak to some people today because I tell you, sometimes we can just get so overwhelmed, you know, and so now what, you know? And we get in that rut sometimes, and sometimes it's just like chaotic and those kind of things. And one of the things, what I'm saying about we're overwhelmed, you know, the Lord brought it to me. He said, what is it that talking about casting down imaginations that exalt themselves against the knowledge of God? Because sometimes being overwhelmed could be a figment of our imagination.
Yeah, oftentimes it is. It is. It's our perception. For instance, today, with such short notice, I could have been overwhelmed and said, no, I can't do it. Mm-hmm. But I'm relying on God to take me through this.
Right, to take you through it.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's almost like I've fallen and I can't get up. So we're titling this is I'm overwhelmed and now what? Because I think a lot of times with circumstances in people's lives and just different things, and we're going to talk about that. But when we get that way, what should happen? So what causes us to feel overwhelmed sometimes? It could be our imagination. It could be what? What are some other things?
Well, a lot of times we start internalizing, looking at self, what we can do, what our capabilities are, which are limited. And we disconnect ourselves from God when we do that.
From the source.
Yeah, from the source of our power and our ability. So when you disconnect yourself, you're on your own. And it's easy to get overwhelmed when you don't keep God in the equation.
Man, that's good. That's some good stuff. Is we eternalize the problems that, you know, that this problem is just so huge, and we begin to magnify that problem. Instead of magnifying God, we begin to magnify the lack or magnify the doctor's report or magnify whatever it is may come our way, and then all of a sudden we just say, man, I just pull him. Well, I ain't got no hair to pull out right now, but I ain't got much hair to pull out. But I'm just about to pull my hair out, and then I notice even in my house when that happens, or when I tend to disconnect from God, you know, because sometimes we disconnect, you know, and that's why I tell people, sin, one way of looking at sin is saying, God, I got this. Is that we disconnect from God. And the Bible said that a man that says he has no sin is a lie. That's why I thank God for Jesus. I thank him for Jesus. I thank him that he's paid for my past, present, and future, because a lot of times not even thinking about it, you can just disconnect from God. And I know in being overwhelmed, and it's almost like an overwhelming spirit. Because then it affects everybody. You've been going to the house and you're in a bad mood and you feel overwhelmed. Now, you know, you don't kick the dog, but you want to kick him, and the cat or whatever. And all of a sudden now your kids are in a bad mood, your wife's in a bad mood, everybody's in a bad mood, because I believe that's called the spirit of overwhelmness.
Well, see, attitudes are contagious.
Yeah, they are.
If you got a bad attitude, those around you are going to develop that same attitude.
And it's just like that too. It's just like that. And sometimes it's that internalizing and feeling that pressure that overwhelms us, that we are in despair, or we feel we're hopeless, that there's no way out of this situation. And you know, believers, we all are believers. I mean, I'm born again, and we have to really acknowledge this, that there are times in our lives when we do feel like we're overwhelmed, we're disconnected from God. But the thing that we have to look at too is you have a lot of people that are committing suicide every day.
Right,
And I
right.
believe that you have a lot of people that are saved
Yeah.
because they get in such a despair of being overwhelmed because they internalize. And I like what you said about how we internalize whatever situation that we're going through. And then it becomes self-centered.
Right.
It becomes about me.
Yeah. It is my belief that most people who commit suicide, attempt to commit suicide, or think about suicide are looking at their abilities. What can I do to change this?
Right.
And oftentimes there's nothing you can do. You
Right.
got to give it to God
Right.
and let Him work through this thing.
So I'm overwhelmed. Now what? Let's start out the first one. The first thing that I want to look at is when I'm overwhelmed or when I'm in a position of I feel like I'm about to be overwhelmed. Is the first thing I like is 1 Peter 5, 6, and 7. It says this: humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you in due time. Now notice that the humility is something that we have to do voluntarily. When others humble us, that isn't humility.
Right.
It's humiliation.
Right.
Okay? When somebody else humbles you, that's called humiliation.
Right. Right.
But it says that when we humble ourselves, and then in verse 7 it says, casting all your care upon Him, for He careth for you. So the first thing that has to kick in when I'm getting into this situation is crunch time. Or, I've been working on a budget. I've been working, on a budget on my job, and it's a huge budget, a massive budget, and we're sitting there, and this happens and that happens, and you got to look at this and got to look at that. It could be overwhelming.
Right. Right.
It could be very overwhelming. But what I have to do, I have to then be saying, look, you know what? God, you got this. Matter of fact, even before I engage in that, I should be at the point of saying, God, you know what? I'm going to cast this on you.
Right. Right.
I'm going to ask you for your wisdom, your insight, your revelation
Right.
to help me even get through this budget process.
Yeah. Your response to the situation speaks volumes. So you can respond in a positive way or you can respond in a negative way. So your response to any situation, it may appear to be overwhelming, but it's really not overwhelming if you approach it right. And see, when God allows you to get in these situations where you're facing adversity, He has a purpose in mind. We, in our finite mind, we can only understand so much, but God sees the whole picture.
Right.
God is trying to establish something in us that will last for eternity. And so He allows situations to come about, but how we respond to that is the key. It's the key.
But so we cast it, though. He says for us to cast our care, that care.
Right.
Now, let's look at this, casting that care, because I want you to understand here is that my wife loves animals. I told her she should have been a veterinarian, a vet. She loves animals. And we got a little dog. We got 2 dogs. And if one of the dogs hurts his foot or something happens to that dog, she'll pick that dog up, more bless your heart, and pray over that dog and that kind of thing. So when we start talking about casting the care, I don't think God has a list of things that we need to cast the care on. Right. What might be insignificant to you might be significant to me.
Right. Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm talking about the little dog. It might be insignificant to you, but it might be significant to her. So He's saying, cast all your cares.
Right.
So when I'm the bills are due, my kids ain't acting right, my money looking funny, so to speak,
Yeah.
or whatever that situation may be, He's saying what? I'm to cast those cares upon Him because He cares for me. Now, I think one of the problems with that, brother, is that do we really believe that God cares?
Well, it depends on the individual. I know I do. I have no problem casting my cares on Him because I know He loves me. Because of
But how do you know?
Because of where He brought me from. He could have let me perish long ago. But from where He brought me from and what He has done in me, I know he loves me.
So in other words, you telling me this, and we just gonna talk, all right? So in other words, you telling me this care that God has for us is an experiential kind of process that we go through. It's something that we, through our relationship with Him, that we experiential on a personal level. In other words, like you said, I know that He cares for me. Now I can't talk for somebody else. I can't talk for that gal, or I can't talk for this lady, but I know that He cares for me because I have an experience with God.
Right. He's shown His love for me. And see, God cares about what you care about, even if it's a cat or a dog. If that concerns you, then He is concerned about that also, because you belong to Him. You've been paid for with a price. So He cares about everything that you cares about. It doesn't matter how insignificant it might seem to others.
To others, yeah. And see, that's the thing, because we're so flippantly that somebody's going through something, we say, what they,
Yeah.
man, what they, you know, we look at that's insignificant, man. I'm over here, I got to make this house payment, and they're talking about they didn't make their golf club fees or something.
Right.
They're just overwhelmed or something like that. But the bottom line is significant. It's important to God.
Right, it is. Everything that is important to you is important to Him.
So He says that we are the cast. What does it mean to cast?
Toss it on Him. Get it off of you. Don't carry that weight around on your shoulders.
What if I go back and pick it up?
Well, then that's on you.
So how do I cast it? How do I cast it?
You got to be able to give it to Him and not worry about it. If you're going to, there's a saying, if you're going to worry, don't pray. If you're going to pray, don't worry. So when you give it to Him, you don't worry about it, because He has the power and ability to handle all things. So you go pick it back up, then He'll take His hands off and let you have it. He's not the kind of God to force you to do things.
Mm-hmm. So you say to cast, to toss it on Him, to cast it on Him, for He careth for us. Now look, we cast all our cares on the Lord. If we're bearing a care, we're walking in pride. You know, if we cannot be humble with worry and care, you know, we cannot be humble with worry and caring in our lives. And a lot of times it's pride.
Yeah.
For example, let's say you got a house payment due, you don't have the money or something. And a lot of times what we get in trouble is we say, well, I'll just fix this myself. I'll go get a loan, or I'll go to this or that, or I'll fix it myself. And that fix it myself kind of mentality is nothing more than pride.
Right. That is an element of pride.
It is an element of pride where I'm going to, and usually we get in trouble when we fix it ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
There's no time that I ain't never got in trouble trying to fix it myself.
Yeah.
Well, I'll fix this, my God, I'll fix it myself.
Yeah. So see, we get in God's way sometime. As I said earlier, He's trying to work something in us that's going to last for eternity. And when we try to fix it ourselves, a lot of times we get in His way. And so many ways we foil His plan, His purpose for that situation.
Yeah, but you know, I really want people to understand, you know, that God really cares. You know that He really cares for us, because I think that's important to grasp that this is about a relationship.
Yeah.
This is real. This is not an abstract. This is not something that when you die, the pie in the sky.
Right.
He talks about eternal life. He said, I believe it's John, over in John, it says that eternal life is knowing the Father, is knowing God. Eternal life begins when you receive salvation, when you receive what Jesus has done, is knowing God, and it means knowing in an intimate way. And so we have to experience this and knowing that God's got us. And when we get overwhelmed and when these challenges and these things come against us, is knowing that we just cast them, that we give them to Him, and that He's got you.
Yeah. He's got your back.
He's got your back on that. Now, I love Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. It says, trust in the Lord with all thy heart, and lean not unto thy own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct our path. So
Powerful.
when I'm overwhelmed, when I feel the sense of being overwhelmed, then he's saying to do what? He's saying to what? Trust in him.
Trust him.
Not lean under our what?
Own understanding. See, oftentimes that's what we do. We start leaning to our own understanding because there's something in us that don't really trust God to do what he said he's going to do.
But that comes out of that relationship, that lack of relationship.
Right.
Is that lack of understanding the importance of not religion, but the importance of walking in that relationship with him.
Right. That's key because my wife, for instance, she knows what I will and what I will not do because we've been intimate together for so many years. Mm-hmm. And God wants us to spend intimate time with him and get to know him and see the manifestation of his works in our lives and to trust him. That's key, trusting God. If we trust him, he will take care of all things for us. But a lot of times we don't trust.
Well, why is this though when we have this feeling or this sensation of being overwhelmed, the first thing we say, God is, where are you? Where are you, God? You know, we'll say things like, where are you, God?
Yeah. He's in the midst. Think, for instance, Joseph. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery. Then while he was in slavery, Potiphar's wife accused him of trying to rape her. He got put in prison. All those years, God was silent with him. But God was doing a mighty work through Joseph. God was using Joseph to raise his chosen people in a pagan land.
But you know, it's something you said earlier, though, that can you imagine your brothers selling you like that, putting you in a pit, despising you? But there was something different about Joseph.
Yeah.
Joseph had to know God. He had to have this relationship with God because for him to go through what he went through and to allow character and everything to be developed in him, Joseph had to have that ongoing relationship because I don't know if I couldn't have probably been Joseph. You couldn't have been. God knew who he had at a certain time to be whoever he had. Because can you imagine being overwhelmed by your siblings that disown you or sell you or hate you?
Well, see, what Joseph had working for him, you spoke of it earlier in Peter. He was humble. He had humility. Going through those trials and things, he was a very humble man. So it was something special about him. Mm-hmm. And see, the Bible shows us patterns and principles that we are to adopt in our lives. So therefore, that humility that Joseph had allowed him to endure all the suffering he went through because he knew God was in the mix. Even though God was silent, he knew God had his back.
So that humility, so a lot of times, and we'll get back to being, when we feel like we're overwhelmed, a lot of times, it's probably due to us being self-centered.
Yeah. Element of pride again.
An element of pride of being self-centered.
Yeah.
Is that when we get to the point where we feel that we're just so overwhelmed, because I look at this sometimes, maybe being overwhelmed, maybe there's a deadline that something has to be done in, and you're feeling overwhelmed. Well, if you don't make that deadline, then people are going to be looking at me.
Right.
Or people are going to be looking at us. Or they're going to be looking at my business. Or they're going to be looking at this or that. Yeah. And it comes back to that, almost that being that self-centeredness.
Right.
Or what would my family think about me if I fail them? You know, if I get fired, if what will people think about me?
Right.
What will people think about me? And it comes back to that being self-centered. Yeah. It's like an element of pride. But when we recognize this, and it will attack us, and it's almost like a spirit. It's almost like an overwhelming spirit that comes in, is that we need to realize we need to humble ourselves before the Lord.
Right.
We need to acknowledge and we need to trust in the Lord. And we have to believe that he cares for us. You know, it's almost like telling your kids to eat spinach because it's good for them, eat broccoli. And you know it's good for them, but it doesn't taste great. Right. And so a lot of times, even what we're going through in the process, because, you know, Jesus is the author and the finisher of my faith. And in this process that he has me, and, you know, we're his workmanship. Right. And he's molding us. And you know, that workmanship means a poem. Or you know, he's writing a poem of us in his life, you know, in our life. But it's almost sometimes it's not a good feeling.
Right.
It doesn't mean all the time it's going to be a good feeling that we'll be going through this.
Right.
Even when we casting our cares upon him, it doesn't mean that okay, now we just go la la la, we're in la la land. We still have a responsibility to when we cast it on him, I believe that's when God instructs us. So we have to be keen to hear what God is saying in that situation.
Right. And then too, you got to trust it. See, you can't cast your fears or your problems on anybody or anything unless you trust that they're going to handle it for you.
Right.
And see, it goes back to trusting God. And to trust someone, you got to spend time with them. You got to be intimate with them and know them. Know they got your back. Know they love you. And they got your best interests at heart. So again, it goes back to spending quality time with God. And as you said, hearing, being able to hear. The more time you spend with him, the more clearly you can hear him. You know, my father been dead for many years, but if I heard his voice today, I would know it because of familiarity.
But that's like when we was raising kids, and you can take a nursery full of kids, but when your kids scream,
you know it.
You know your kid. Now you got a whole bunch of kids now, you know your kids scream. And so with that casting of our cares, when we get in this situation where we feel like we're overwhelmed and we're casting these cares, we have to believe that God cares for us, but then we also have to have a timidity or a humble and be able to listen to what God is saying.
Right.
Because it's not like abracadabra or Shazam, and the problems go, he's going to order our steps. The steps of a righteous man are ordered what? Of God.
Of God, yeah.
And I'm in right standing with God through what? Jesus.
Right.
To what Jesus has already done.
Right.
So when I'm feeling overwhelmed, now what? I've got to cast those cares. I got to humble myself.
Yeah.
I got to believe that God can do what he said he can do. I got to believe that. Mark 9:23, all things are possible for those who what? Believe.
Believe, yeah.
So I got to believe that he can handle my situation.
Right.
And there's not one situation. I don't care if you're going through bankruptcy. I don't care if you're going through a marriage that you feel like is over and done with. I don't care if it's some type of job situation. I don't care if it's some type of situation that you done jammed yourself up in, that you're even looking at doing 25 years or 10 years. And some of us, maybe we need to do some time.
Right.
Or whatever that situation is. I don't care. Right now, if you're looking at me, even if you're in prison right now, is that God can still overcome any obstacle that's in your life. You may feel overwhelmed in that orange jumpsuit right now, if you're looking in the prison system and all. But listen, with God, all things are possible. But you have to humble yourself. You have to cast your cares.
Yeah, you do. A lot of times, and God would have to put you in a position where you have to listen. And a lot of times, guys running the streets, doing what they want to do, God allowed them to get locked up. So they have to sit.
Well, this is my philosophy, locking people up, arresting people. And God knows in Greenville, I arrested a lot of people. And to me, it was ministry.
Yeah.
To me, it was ministry, because I felt that if I could take them, whether they drug dealers or whatever they done, if I could take them and put them into the system where they could get silent, where they could shut down.
Right.
And just maybe, they could hear what God was saying. So I look at it as total ministry. I don't look at it as I'm punishing that person. That's an aspect of it. But I look at it as total ministry. Even in our lives, we can lose a job. And God could be in the midst of that.
Right.
Even in that job, because if we didn't lose that job, we could have went somewhere. Man, if I had enough time, I could tell you stories. When I left the sheriff's office, I went to work out of Columbia. I went to work in Columbia and worked 5 years working with the state in Columbia and had a vehicle and everything. And one day they pulled our vehicles and put them in a carpool and saying, you know what, you use the vehicle when you're on the road, so you got to drive to Columbia every day, get your vehicle unless you're working in the upstate. Right. And so I didn't have a car. But in the midst of that, God prepared me to be put in the position I'm in now.
Right.
And I could have got overwhelmed and said, you know what, I'm overwhelmed, I'm sick of this. You guys are not keeping up your obligation to what you guys promised me with the state and this and that. But no, I realized that was a potential, a place where that I was in that maybe it was more to than what it was about me, being instead of being self-centered.
Right.
And it positioned me to be in the position I'm in today.
Right. Right.
Because I did. I catch that. I catch that on him.
Yeah.
I mean, it was hitting my pocketbook too. That's when gas was almost $3 a gallon or whatever.
Right.
But I cast that on him. Did I make some mistakes? Yeah, along the way I did. But I learned that I had to cast that on him. And I had to believe that God cared for me. And in the midst of that, God began to do a work in me, began to show me things. And I landed up being a chief of police.
Right. Right.
But I had to go through some stuff.
Yeah.
But if I would allow that for me to get overwhelmed, I could have got bitter, because when you become overwhelmed, you become bitter, become cynical.
Yeah. Yeah. See, in the midst of that, you had no idea where God was taking you.
No, we had to be somewhere.
So he's all things work together for good to those who love God and call according to His purpose.
Because there were many nights I slept in my office. Look, because I said, now either I'm going to eat there or I'm going to have gas to drive home, because I had to go out and buy a car.
Right. Right.
And so I'd be the first one there, because they didn't know I slept in my office, and down below my office was the gym, and I'd get up early in the morning and go work out.
Yeah. And
then take a shower, and I was good to go. They say, you here off early? I said, yeah, I'm ready to go. Didn't know that I slept. I had a blow up, one of these mattresses blown up, and I put it in my long file cabinet. And boy, when everybody was gone, and that time of the night, I'd do some work, and I pull it out and blow it up, and I'd sleep right there in my office.
Yeah.
Nobody never knew. Right. I never told a soul. Right. I didn't go crying. I didn't say the director done me wrong. He's one of my mentors today.
Right.
He's one of my friends today, because I didn't allow it to become, at looking at that, I could have became very bitter, become overwhelmed, very bitter, but I cast it on him because he cared for me. Right. Well, look, our time is just about gone. I tell you, the time just flies, doesn't it? It's just about gone. And I know you've been blessed today by watching the Exchange Life. And listen, we'd love to have your support. And probably it's coming up on the screen to tell you, you can give me a call or Facebook me at Tony C. Taylor at Facebook and become part of my Facebook friends there. Love to have you there. And I'm telling you, God is so awesome. He is such a good God. And tell your friends about this broadcast. Tell them about the Exchange Life. I know you're going to be blessed. Well, I tell you, my time is just running out. Thank you for coming, and I want to have you back again sometime. Anytime. Okay, I'll call you up at the last minute and say, hey, I need you to come up there. Well, listen, it's been great, and I know that you're blessed. You're blessed. And it's time for me to go now, so we'll see you next time on the Exchange Life broadcast.